What's up again, everybody? Last time we reviewed some cards, we reviewed the Infinity Watch affiliation. Today we're going to review all of the cards from the Infinity Gauntlet set that have the Black Order affiliation on them. If you'd like to play along with me in the comments below, feel free to rate these cards yourself and share your ratings down in a comment. Alright, let's get started. There are 22 Black Order affiliated cards in this set, and the first one is Black Dwarf Powerhouse. He's a 5-cost fist character with an 031, 142, 062 stat line, and he says when fielded, replace target character die's printed attack with double its printed attack on all faces until the end of the turn. Overall, this is a fine card. It's a bit expensive for the ability, even though the ability is really cool. We do find this ability on the Jerry Lawler Global, for example. So the fact that you have to invest 5 in using this is a little prohibitive. But the fact that he can target himself with this ability means you always have a target for it. And the combo of using this along with an overcrushing character is one that is functional and pretty decent. So I gave this a C-. Black Swan the Cabal is a 4-cost bolt character with a 144, 155, 166 stat line, and on its level 2 and level 3 faces it has a burst and double burst respectively. And this card says while Black Swan is active, if you use an energize ability, you gain 1 life. So how good is gaining life? Well, generally in this game, gaining life is not very good. That being said, the act of gaining life is generally a net positive, but if your main goal of using a card is to gain life, then historically that's not been a very good card in this game. That being said, this is a 4-drop with good stats, and obviously if you build around this card with energize abilities that are positive along with gaining life, then you could do some interesting things with this. So I gave this a D+, and I could probably be talked into a C- if we saw some really strong energize effects paired alongside of this to make it a little bit more worth it. Obviously we know of a few energize effects that are really great already, both in this set and out of set, so there is some utility here. It's just not all that useful. Corvus Glaive Madness is a 2-cost fist character with an 021, 131, 031 stat line. Really strange little stat line for the fielding costs there. And it has no text at all, it's just blank. How good is a 2-cost blank text card? It's not bad, it's just not good. This is like a D, maybe it's a C if you're playing things that look for Black Order affiliation, but other than that, this is just a D. I will say though, if you're playing in draft though, I would probably pick this pretty early just because 2-drop characters in draft are really strong, so it also depends on your format, but outside of draft, this is more like a D than it is a C in draft. On to Ebony Maw Gleeful Killer, a 4-cost mask character with an 012, 022, 133 stat line that says when fielded, deal 2 damage to target character die. If that die is KO'd by this damage, the next character die you purchase this turn costs 1 less. This card is super solid. Not only do we get a beneficial when fielded effect that we could use in a very flexible manner to either KO this card itself, KO one of our own sidekicks, or even KO one of our opponent's characters or sidekicks. We also get this wonderful little discount if we go ahead and do KO something, which again might encourage you to KO your own thing. You get a discount, you cycle something out of the field, like this when fielded effect for example. It's just all around really solid. This is great in draft settings where you're trying to make these larger purchases more easy. This is really interesting for little combos and little synergies on constructed level teams. I give this a solid little C+. Speaking of solid cards, next up we have Proxima Midnight the Black Order, a 3-drop shield character with a 131, 142, 144 stat line that says when fielded, KO a character die that you control, and if you do, the next die you purchase this turn costs 2 less. So what we're looking at here is a similar ability to what we just saw on Ebony Maw, except this costs 1 less to purchase. It's got a better stat line. It doesn't allow you to KO something on your opponent's side of the field by dealing it 2 damage. This just says we have to KO something of our own, but that's not necessarily a drawback because oftentimes you do want to KO something of yours so that again you can cycle this and replay it, or cycle something and replay it. This can target itself. This card is like super solid. I like this one even better. I haven't even talked about the fact that it's 2 less to purchase something instead of 1 less versus that Ebony Maw we just talked about. This is definitely a C+, and this could even sneak its way onto some competitive teams that are really looking for a KO trigger, and if it does, that would make this card a B. So look to see what goes on to some competitive teams going forward, and if we see this card show up, then this is a B card. Next up is Super Giant Intangibility, a 3-drop shield character with an 012, 132, 155 stat line, and the Regenerate keyword, which basically basically just means if this gets KO'd, then you re-roll the die, and if it comes up character face, it goes back into the field, and if not, then it goes to prep. So how good is a 3-drop with Regenerate? Well, it's actually pretty solid. I would pick this up in draft myself. This is not like the shiniest, brightest, look at this kind of card. It's not super flashy, but it would get the job done in a draft setting. I'm not sure you're putting this onto a constructed team. Maybe you're trying to mess around with like Regenerate or anything like that, or maybe you're just looking for a theme team, but this is a solid little entry. I give this a C. Next up, we have Thanos Courting Death, a 7-drop mask character with the Thanos stat line of 157278399, which is really, really solid. Expensive, but solid. And it says Thanos costs 2 less to purchase to a minimum of 1 while you have 10 or less life. So if you have 10 life or less, then essentially you can get Thanos for 5 instead of 7. Now how good is that? Answer, not very good. At the point where you can actually purchase this for 5 with 10 or less life, you're probably going to die in a few turns. And having a 9/9 right as you die is not a great feeling. Also keep in mind, this does not have Overcrush, this does not have a secondary ability, it's just a big statted guy that only discounts himself after you're at half health. You could run this, there is some value to having high stats, so it's not an F in my book, but this is definitely a low D. Next up, we have Black Dwarf, the Black Order. We're into the uncommons now, and this is a 5-drop fist character with the same stat line as before that says when fielded, KO target character die you control. If you do, the next die you purchase this turn costs 2 less. Hey, we've seen this ability before, and on something that costs 2 cheaper. So what are we getting for paying 2 extra and investing in Black Dwarf here instead of the common Proxima Midnight? Well, we're getting more attack stats and less defensive stats. In fact, if you put together the attack and defense stats on each side of both Black Dwarf and Proxima Midnight, you have the exact same aggregate stats on each side. You've got a 3-1, a 4-2, and on Black Dwarf you get a 6-2, and on Proxima Midnight you get a 4-4. So which would you prefer? Would you prefer this ability on a 5-drop or a 3-drop? The answer is 3-drop. Is this still playable? Yes. Is it as good as its counterpart? No, which makes it a D. On to Black Swan, our Lady of the Apocalypse, a 5-cost bolt character with the same stat line, and don't forget it's got a burst and double burst face on its level 2 and level 3 sides. That comes into play here on the character text, which says on the burst and on the double burst, this character has Overcrush. How good's a 5-drop Overcrush character? Well, it's pretty good in draft, so if you have this in draft, you might consider taking it. This is a set where it's easier to buy 5-drops because of the things that are inside of it. There are cost reduction effects and general ramp effects in basic actions like investigation that you can invest in, so this is a pretty decent buy in a draft setting. That being said, there are other Overcrush characters in the set, and it's not even really the best Overcrush character that you can possibly get, so to me this is like a C- because I feel like you could invest in other things in draft and just let this one slip by. Because knowing me, if I picked this up in a draft and then I purchased it in a draft game, I would roll it on its level 1 character face every time, and I would basically be having a blank text 4-4, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it would make me a little bit salty. So this to me is a C-. Next up is Corvus Glaive, Wanton Violence, a 3-drop fist character with that same stat line that says when fielded, you may deal 1 damage to target character die, and your opponent may deal 1 damage to target sidekick. So if you're like me, the first thing you thought of is how many characters in the set actually have 1 defense on one of their character faces, most likely their level 1 character face. So I went through and I sorted all of the character dice in this set by their defensive ratings on their level 1 character side, and we do actually see that there's a good number of character dice that have 1 defense. There's things like Turk Barrett, there's the Spot, Sandman, Rocket Raccoon, there's obviously Corvus himself and Proxima Midnight and Pip the Troll, there's Black Dwarf, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. This means that there's going to be a good number of targets that Corvus Glaive actually could KO, and if he doesn't even get to target one of those character dice because they're on level 2 or level 3 or not even part of the game, he still gets to KO one of your opponent's sidekicks. So after he does his thing, then your opponent gets the opportunity to deal 1 damage to a sidekick. Now they could KO their own sidekick and ramp themselves a little bit, or they could KO one of your sidekicks. and ramp you a little bit. But the nice thing about this card for us is that we are thinning out their field while fielding a high attack, easy to KO character of our own. This could end up being one of those cards where you pick it up in draft and you just play it, and you play multiple copies of it, and you buy them up and you just use them and play really, really aggro, and you don't care if these get KO'd by your opponent's sidekicks because you're constantly making them refield those sidekicks to avoid taking 2 damage or 3 damage, and you're just getting this to cycle and allowing you to kind of combo this with itself, maybe dealing 2 damage to something on their side of the field with multiples of these. All in all, I see this as being a pretty solid draft option, so I see this as a C. Ebony Maw Twisted Brilliance is a 4-drop mask character that says when fielded, draw and roll a die. Place it in your reserve pool. Now your first knee-jerk reaction may be to give this the old D tag and just move right along, but actually this is more like a C than it is a D, mainly because this effect is actually pretty solid in general. Drawing and rolling a die is ramp, and while not the flashiest form of ramp, this is a functional form of ramp, so it's not a D, it may not be powerful enough to be a C, but I do give this 4-cost draw and roll a die character a C-. The uncommon Proxima Midnight, Tip of the Spear, 4-cost shield character with a misworded ability. In fact, it's just missing words. This card just says target non-Proxima Midnight Black Order character die gains +2 attack and overcrush until the end of the turn. So first of all, you need to figure out when the timing actually happens of this. This is not a while active effect. This is not like a once per turn thing. This was literally ruled on by Jimmy from WizKids to be a when fielded effect, and that makes a ton of sense because we see when fielded effects all over these cards. The Black Order themselves are sort of like a when fielded effect affiliation in a lot of ways. So if we insert that in, we now know that when you field this Proxima Midnight, she's going to give another Black Order character die +2 attack and overcrush, and that is very good. To see how good it is, just imagine comboing this with like the 3-cost Corvus Glaive that we just saw and talked about, or even the blank text 2-cost. All of a sudden, if you're attacking with that 2-cost on its level 3 side, you've got that 3-1. Now it's a 5-1 with overcrush. Or even better, you could play this alongside of the common Black Dwarf powerhouse that we talked about and do some crazy stuff where you field Black Dwarf and he targets himself with the printed attack doubling. Say he's on his level 2 side, he goes from 4 attack to 8 attack from his own ability, and then you field the Proxima Midnight here, and you give him +2 attack on top of that and overcrush. You're attacking with a 10 attack overcrusher in draft. You could do that in draft. And in constructed, this can play nicely with like the uncommon Thanos we're about to talk about, or really just about any of the Black Order character dice, because in constructed, these things are a lot easier to set up. This card is solid. This is like a C+ all the way to maybe even a B- if you're playing this in constructed, because overcrush is just good and there's tools around for overcrush to be even better now. Now we have Super Giant Remote Possession, a 5-drop shield character that has both regenerate and an effect that says when fielded, take control of target character die until it leaves the field zone or the end of the turn. Okay, my rating here could be very controversial to you, but this is at least a B and possibly an A level card. This could be a meta staple card. Now you look at me and you go, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and you probably turned off the video, but don't turn off the video and hear me out. Look, yes, it is a 5-drop and that is expensive, but if your opponent has not turned off the when fielded effect with their own characters, then this basically says when fielded, take your opponent's win condition and throw it at them. Think about high level play right now. It's Godcatcher and it's Becky Lynch, and then it's a bunch of other stuff. Now maybe the meta has mixed up now that we have this set incorporated with it, so maybe you have Iceman as well. But imagine all of those win conditions, and then imagine playing this down onto a board while your opponent has a 10-10 Godcatcher that can call out something to block. Or imagine playing this down onto a board where your opponent has an 8-8 overcrushing Becky Lynch, and they brought the global tools to allow you to double its attack and force something to block. All of a sudden, with this 5-drop, you can essentially play their own win condition against them. And while for them, they would only get like the 8-8 Becky Lynch to put out in the field, or the 10-10 Godcatcher to put out in the field, you get to take that 8-8 or 10-10 and add to it, on average, a 3-2 alongside of it, it, or a 5/5, or maybe you get unlucky and get the 1/2. Nevertheless, this effect is really strong in this current meta. It could even be good in the Iceman matchup if your opponent is bringing the variant of Iceman where they use a bunch of globals to ping him, because then you could steal him and then attack with him and then ping him to death, putting it in their prep area, making them roll it again, and dealing them a bunch of damage. Like, this card has so much play, and I really think that this could cut its way into high level competitive. Now, its biggest knock is that it's a 5-drop, but essentially think about it like this. If they're buying a 5-drop Becky Lynch, you can buy a 5-drop Supergiant and take their Becky Lynch, and then attack, and then remove their Becky Lynch, or remove a bunch of the things they attack with, and cycle your own Supergiant, hopefully, so that you can play and take their Becky Lynch again. You're essentially investing 5 into their card alongside of them. Yeah, I think this card's gonna be good, and I could be wrong, and if I am, then I'll eat my words, but that's how it goes, right? Okay, wrapping up the uncommons, and I'll pick up the pace. Sorry, I got distracted by Supergiant. Thanos' Overpowering Strength is a 7-drop mask character that says when Thanos KOs an opposing die, place it in the used pile. While this effect is cool and interesting, and we've actually put it onto a custom card as a community before, the fact that this doesn't have Overcrush and it just costs so much in the form of 7 energy means that there's just better options. There's even better Thanoses printed previous to this that you'd rather go to than this one. So while you could play this and the effect is kind of cool, it's not the greatest. This is a D. Into the rares we go with Black Dwarf Giant Axe, a 5-drop fist character that says when fielded, target non-Black Dwarf character die gets +2 attack and gains Overcrush until the end of the turn. So again, we see the Proxima Midnight effect, but we're having to pay 1 more for it for this die instead of for the Proxima Midnight stat line. But this has a global ability that says pay 0 once per turn on your turn, spin one of your sidekick dice to its fist face. Okay, that is an energy fixer. Energy fixers are very good in this game in general. Sometimes you play them on high competitive teams, most of the time you don't, but they almost always make their way onto mid-level competitive teams. And that automatically means that this is a B-level card. That doesn't even count the fact that the ability is still pretty good for a 5-drop. You might still consider playing this. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually get to target itself, but you can actually target something that's not Black Dwarf related, which is really cool about this card. That's the main difference between this and the uncommon Proxima Midnight that we were talking about earlier. That one has to target a Black Order character. This one can target anything. So this has a little bit more playability, plus it's got the global ability on there. So this is a solid B. Black Swan Yabat Umon Turu, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I'm gonna go with it, is a 5-drop Bolt character that says when 1 or more of your Black Swan character dice attack, you may re-roll any of your active character dice. Okay, so I know that's weird, right? Just wait, it gets weirder. On the double burst face, which is on the level 3 character side, it says you may also re-roll any of your active character dice when 1 or more of your Black Swan character dice block. So you can re-roll your own character dice when she attacks, and then on the top face, also when she blocks. God, I just cannot wrap my head around why you would ever want to do that, except for maybe triggering energize effects or maybe getting extra energy to do things with. But just deep down to me, just the act of re-rolling your character dice and having them come up energy and then using that energy for some sort of effect. You can't purchase things because you're in the attack or the blocking phase. So just using that energy for like globals and then having that character go to used just seems so bad for 5-drops. I mean, just bad in general, really. This is, to me, this is just an F, like straight up F, bottom of the barrel. This is an effect that's worse than a blank text, perhaps. I don't know, maybe there's some weird, crazy combo out there that just hasn't hit me yet. And if you know about it, let me know in a comment below. Otherwise, this is an F. Continuing on, we have Corvus Glaive Grim Lieutenant, a 3-drop fist character that says when fielded, you may move a non-sidekick die from your used pile to its card, and if you do, deal 2 damage to target character die or player. This is like one of those cards you should definitely keep your eye on. It's a when fielded effect, which is already very good. It has some crazy wombo combo potential in the fact that you get to move something you purchased back to its card and then perhaps purchase it again. So if there's ever any more impulse effects that are really strong, this could be something that goes along with that. And then there's also the aspect where you just get to deal 2 to your opponent or to one of their character dice once you do that. I feel as though this card's not quite there yet, and you could build around this to do really cool things, but it's not powerful enough to really sit down and warrant putting it all together right now, but it's still a really solid card in general. I would give this a C. Ebony Maw Supernatural Persuasion, a 5-drop mask character that says when fielded, reroll target opposing character die. Your character dice cost 2 less to purchase this turn for each Ebony Maw die fielded this turn. So technically, if you bought more than one of these, you could field these and reduce like by 4 or 6 all of your character dice. So already a really good ability. The fact that he's a mask character means you can bring him down to 3 by just playing Asuka and him, which is really something you want to remember. And then you look and see that he has a global ability that says pay a fist mask. Target character die gains the villain affiliation until the end of the turn. So we have not had a villain affiliation maker in ages, and all of a sudden we have one returning for now. Now, how utilitarian is this? There's not a ton of utility out there that makes you want to play a villain maker. That being said, we do have to remember this for later, because if there are villains that pop up that have synergies with other villains, then this would be a card to go to make something a villain and combine those powers essentially. But yeah, just the fact that this card has a really powerful when fielded effect that re-rolls something that your opponent has and reduces the purchase cost on your character dice by 2, all of them until the end of the turn. This is a card you also want to keep your eye out for, because this could make its way onto semi-competitive or competitive teams as well, depending on what Asuka does in the meta. I give this a B. Proxima Midnight, Killer for Hire, is a 6-drop shield character. She's the rare version of Proxima Midnight, and she says when fielded, KO all opposing level 1 character dice. So ignoring all of the combo abilities first and just looking at what the ability by itself does in a vacuum, you're essentially paying 6 for a 4/2 that wipes your opponent's entire board of sidekicks, and perhaps even removes a few of their level 1 character dice that they actually kind of wanted to keep around, right? That's not bad. It's kind of expensive for that ability, but it's not bad once you look at it on paper. After you've paid the 6 and put it out in the field, you get a 4/2 and you remove like 3 blockers plus a few actual characters. Then keep in mind that you can play characters like the 2-drop Black Widow rare that allows you to spin down your opponent's character dice to 1 level lower than what they actually are. And you could even play Focus alongside of this, which is a basic action in this set that says spin 1 target character die up or down 1 level. And if you get it on the burst face or the double burst face, then you get to spin 2 target character dice up or down 1 level. Basically, what we're looking at is a win condition that allows you to push physical damage after you remove your opponent's blockers. And I think that's kind of cool. It's not the most powerful thing in the world, but the fact that you can actually build around this card means it has some playability. I'm giving this a C+, maybe a B-, mainly because it is a win condition that you could actually build a casual team around. Next up, we have Supergiant Mind Control, 4-cost shield character with Regenerate again, and it also says when fielded, you may use a copy of target character die's when fielded ability. Are there character dice in this set with when fielded abilities that you would want to copy? Oh my goodness, yes, there are so many. In fact, we've talked about several in this video alone that you'd be okay with copying, especially at a 4-drop price range. Not to mention that if your opponent has fielded a really powerful when fielded effect and not removed it from the board by the time that you get to roll Supergiant, when you field your own Supergiant, you get to just copy their effect. For example, if your opponent has used Rare Pip the Troll on some of your character dice and then left Rare Pip the Troll in the field and you play Rare Supergiant, all of a sudden you get to remove their things with their own Rare Pip the Troll, which is pretty cool. I give this one a solid C+. And the last 2 cards are Thanosis. The first one's Thanos, Enemy of Life, an 8-drop mask character that says Energize. Target character die gets +4 attack. So if you miss rolling him on his character face and you get 2 masks, then you get to give something +4 attack. That's pretty cool. Thanos also says Thanos costs 2 less to purchase, minimum of 1, while your opponent has 20 life. Okay, compare this to the Thanos that said he costs 2 less to purchase while you have 10 life or lower. Your opponent having 20 life is so much easier to fulfill than you having 10 or less life, mainly because once you start the game, he costs 6. So a 6-drop 9/9 on top that has an Energize effect that gives something else a buff is not a bad card to invest in. I wish it had Overcrush. It doesn't, unfortunately, but maybe you can run something alongside of it that gives it Overcrush, like one of these previously discussed Black Order characters. This is a solid middle-of-the-road C. And the final card and the final Thanos that we're going to talk about is Thanos Preparing the Way, a 7-drop mask super rare. This one has Overcrush. Oh, finally, good God, it took so long. Here we are, Overcrush on Thanos. It also says, once per turn, when you field a Black Order character die, you may KO target character die you control. If you do, Thanos costs 2 less to a minimum of 1. Okay, now we are talking. This is at least a B, and definitely is going to make its way onto some semi-competitive teams. Let me talk to you about why. First of all, if you combine this with Asuka, this thing costs 5 on its own. Second of all, if you play this alongside of that 5-drop mask Ebony Maw that when fielded, you get to reduce the purchase cost of everything by 2, which by the way, again is a mask, so it really costs 3. Once you play that, Thanos goes from a 5-drop with Asuka on the field to a 3-drop. And then if you do that and then trigger Thanos' ability here, KOing your Ebony Maw, because you fielded Ebony Maw, a Black Order character die, you want to cycle him by KOing him, all of a sudden Thanos now costs 1. And as far as I can tell, this does not mean that Thanos costs 1 for only 1 die. I'm pretty sure this means Thanos costs 1 for the entire turn. So if you have 4 masks after doing that little combo of fielding a single Ebony Maw that you've already purchased, if you've got 4 masks after that, you just get to buy 4 9/9s with Overcrush. That's disgusting. So yeah, all in all, I'm pretty confident that this card is insanely good, and it's at least a B, if not even better. So there it is, another review in the books for this new Infinity Gauntlet set. What do you think about the cards in the Black Order affiliation? Are you a fan? Let me know in a comment below if you stayed through the entire video. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.